Welcome to my American History Notes, where I discuss conclusions I've drawn from studying American history. Conclusions you might not agree with, but you need to know about the times and the people and places and events, concepts that I talk about. So, we're going to talk about Harding's administration for a little bit right now. The 29th President of the United States, Warren Gamaliel Harding, served from 1921 to 1923. His administration was a dark mark on American history. It was a scandal ridden and thankfully short. He was chosen in a Chicago hotel room, the quote, smoke filled room of political legend, where deals are made out of sight of the public, as a compromise candidate to break the deadlock in the 1920 Republican National Convention. The Ohio senator was good looking and his personality affable, and a war weary America was looking for a return to something that was called normalcy. Harding was the first person to move directly from the U.S. Senate to the presidency. He received over 16 million votes, more than twice of any previous presidential candidate, with many of his votes coming from women for the first time. He led the nation in the Jazz Age into the Jazz Age with his lackadaisical view of morals and its flaunting of the prohibition against alcoholic beverages. Even in the White House, prohibition was disregarded. The nation also entered the radio age as KDKA in Pittsburgh made the first broadcast of an election in Harding's victory. He appointed a cabinet of distinguished men, but historians say that the real decisions were made at evening poker and drinking parties in the White House with cronies and hangers on. Friends from Ohio flocked to Washington for jobs and became known as the quote Ohio Gang. Their headquarters was called quote the Little Greenhouse and was located at 1625 K Street in Washington, where government offices were bought and sold, although there is no evidence that Harding himself knew of these transactions. Harding did win the respect of other nations by calling the Washington Conference for the Limitation of Armaments in 1921, giving him a reputation as a man of peace in foreign capitals. Due to the Senate's refusal to ratify the Treaty of Versailles, separate treaties were made with Germany and its allies that kept the U.S. from participating in the League of Nations. Harding appealed to the steel industry to abolish the 12-hour working day, as Wilson before him had fought for shorter working days. He had protective tariffs to new levels with the Fordham-Macumber Act of 1922, but when Congress passed a large soldier's bonus for war veterans, he vetoed it because they had not thought of a way to raise the extra revenue. In those days, we didn't have a red China to borrow money from. A scandal in the Veterans Bureau, prompted by the corruption of its director, Charles Forbes, a Medal of Honor winner, the suicide of the Bureau's attorney, and the loss of Republican seats in Congress with the 1922 elections, rocked his administration. Another crony, Jesse Smith, roommate of Attorney General Dougherty, who had helped get Harding elected, was one of the most powerful members of the Ohio gang. He too committed suicide, supposedly. Harding had gone on a speaking tour to shore up flagging support for the Republican Party in his administration. During his trip, he died what appeared to be a heart attack or a blood clot. But since his wife refused to permit an autopsy, rumors were rife that he was poisoned to prevent him from testifying against former friends, of whom more corruption had been revealed to him during his trip. It seems that members of his administration had been in cahoots with big oil companies to control oil fields, including Teapot Dome in Wyoming. Former members of Harding's administration were convicted of federal crimes and sentenced to prison. There was also some things that happened in that era. There's a lot of things I'll be talking about in different things later on about different sessions later on about race. Um, but there was a riot of white people in Oklahoma um, during this time um, that killed a lot of black people. Um, the the Tulsa race massacre, um, and it happened. It happened actually. It happened in the date of it. Let me pull up the date of it. It took place between May 31st and June 1st, 1921. Mobs of white residents, some of them who had been deputized and were given weapons by city officials, attacked blacks and destroyed homes and businesses in the Greenwood district in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It became known as the Tulsa Race Riot. Um, it's the single worst incident of racial violence in American history. So it's more than 800 people were admitted to hospitals. As many as 6,000 black people were locked up. and many for several days, and 36 were killed in the streets. So it was a pretty bad. It began during the Memorial Day weekend. What happened was a black shoe shiner was accused of assaulting a 17-year-old elevator operator, a white, in a nearby building, and he was taken into custody. Then there was rumors he was going to be lynched, and then a mob had lynched a white man the previous year, and hundreds of white men surrounded the jail. 75 black men, some of whom were armed, arrived to ensure that the suspect would not be lynched. And it just went on and on and on. And white rioters invaded the Greenwood area of Tulsa that night and began killing and burning and looting. And they had to impose martial law. So it was a pretty bad thing that happened, and it was the worst. Like I said, the worst case of racial violence in our history. I'll be discussing things like this in a future session. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you'll come to your own conclusions studying American history.